Good morning, everyone. I'm Misha Lawson, Membership Services Coordinator for the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. Thank you for joining us for this morning's strategic planning webinar presented by retired Chief Jeff Klein. If you have any questions, we will answer them at the end of the presentation. You can either raise your hand or type questions into the question bar and we will get those answered for you. And now I will turn it over to Chief Klein.
Thank you very much, Misha. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the help that everybody in the office does. My name is Jeff Klein. I am currently the Deputy Director with Ohio, Deputy Director of Wood County Emergency Management, recently retired Fire Chief from the city of Perrysburg. Back in 2015, the city of Perrysburg actually did our own first real strategic plan. And I kind of give you an overview of how we did it, how it was done. First off, I was a little bit skeptic myself. I had always kind of drank the Kool-Aid, if you will, for strategic plans and why strategic plans are important. But in the early 2000s, we had an individual in our organization that went to an executive leadership class, and he came back with a similar process, and we started trying to do budget things with it. And it wasn't as successful as it could have been. People didn't really understand what the process was. They were trying to buy mulch for the fire station and get the trees trimmed for the fire station rather than looking at things like replacing air packs and that. And they wanted to get MDTs for the vehicles, but we didn't have any programs at the time or anything to use on them. So it kind of gave me a little bit of skepticism as to whether or not we really should do something like this. And then 2007, I graduated from OFE, where we had strategic planning. And then in 2007, September, I was promoted to Fire Chief for the city of Perrysburg. And they gave me marching orders, if you will, the direction of the organization that they wanted it to go in, and they made it very clear to me that if something happened, I was the one that was ultimately responsible. So I'm the one that needs to be making all the decisions and so forth. So it always really concerned me, do I really want to open this up to the outside world? Because the process that I went through before, people didn't really understand it, and it's just going to create more problems. So for a year or so, worked on a strategic plan by myself. Created it, showed it to people, they looked and they all said, yep, that's really nice, glad you did it, and we filed it. And fast forward to 2015, when we hired a new deputy chief, Chief Rudy Ruiz. He asked me about it, and I showed it to him, and he said, well, geez, it's, 7, 8 years old, we need to update it. And I said, well, luckily we haven't done anything with it. And he's like, oh, you got to do something with that. So after a lot of convincing, and as any good employee would do when their boss was wrong, he got me convinced that this is something we need to do, got the city powers to be. So we're going to kind of give you an overview of just how everything went with that process. And basically, when you think of strategic planning, this is the good fancy definition for it, but really what you're doing is you're creating a plan that kind of gives you direction, how you're going to get there, what strategy you're going to use, who all is going to be involved, and what are the resources you're going to need to make everything come together. And when you look at strategic plans, they look at 3 different types. The first one is short-term, less than a year. This is something that really pretty much needs to be done now. Medium range, depending on what statistics you look at, you're looking pretty much 1 to 3 years. A few years out, we know we're going to buy a fire truck a couple of years down the road. Let's get a committee together now. And then you've got your long range, which is usually 3 or more, but typically 5 years is really the max. When you think about how the world has changed, and just the last few years and the way technology is, to go out and create plans to do something for your communication system, 8, 9, 10 years out, it's going to be outdated by the time you get there. That's not to say that this replaces your capital improvement plans. Most places have those, replace an engine every 20 years, what have you. This is more for the day-to-day things and keeping everybody up to date. The 4 fundamental questions that you have to ask: where are we going? What do we want to get out of this? What do we want to do? And how are we going to get there? What tools are we going to need that we don't have? What's the blueprint for action going to be? The roadmap? Basically, how are we going to get there? And this lets everybody know, gets everybody on the same page to get them where we need to be. And then I think one of the most important things is it keeps people on track. Everybody out there has been to a meeting where you start talking about one thing and 5 minutes later you're talking about something else. when you've got the strategic plan and you continually reference it, it keeps people on track. If you're going out and, buying a fire engine, you're not talking necessarily about putting wetsuits or things on that. And this is just a good way to keep people on track, keep people moving in the direction they need to do. The value, it creates a vision for the organization. That's one of the things most places don't have. You talk to the folks on the line, what's the vision? And it's like, well, maybe go on an EMS run, maybe put a fire out, but there's so much more than that. It ties the organization together. It gives them a common sense of purpose. Improves the communication. I don't know too many fire departments that you go to that people complain about communication either direction. This is just another tool in the toolbox. And again, it helps with the long-range planning. When you start dealing with elected officials and city administrators and township administrators, things like that, there's a lot of things that they're more concerned about than just the fire department. And if they have to start buying heavy equipment or other buildings or things like that, they need to figure out when they can work some of these things into their 5-year plan. And it gets them, kind of puts them on notice, if you will, that something's coming up down the road. And it moves a dream into a reality by tying everything together. And no organization that's stagnant, you're either living or you're dying. And if you think about that, if you got an organization that's stagnant and is not moving, it's just there. Somebody else is going to come up with new technology. Somebody else is going to come up with a better way. We really don't have any choice but to embrace the changes in society and kind of move with those and look and say, how are they going to fit within my organization? And the advantages to it, good employees become frustrated in stagnant organizations. We've all seen that where it's like, they've all got a lot of good ideas and, boy, we want to do this and we want to do that, but, it just seems like nobody ever listens to me. Well, this gives them a great forum that they can do it. Produces the documented outcomes. This is the goal that we're going for. This is what we want to do. You've got employee engagement. We've all sat around the kitchen table at the station, talking about, boy, if I was chief or this or that, and people come up with some pretty good ideas. Well, if we don't get out and talk to our folks, we don't know these ideas are out there. And I think really one of the most important things and really impressed me out of my organization at the time was the ownership people took. This wasn't, I put words on a piece of paper and everybody looked and said, that's nice. They helped form the words that went on this piece of paper. And every time they look at it, that's a piece of me. And now that it's a piece of me, I really need to do something to keep it moving in the way that we want it to. And it helps to be part of a top-notch organization. There's a department that I know of that at 11 o'clock every night they clean their tires. And they did this for years. And in the mid-'80s, somebody asked the question, why do we do it? And the answer was brake dust. We need to get the brake dust off the tires. Well, they actually traced it back to the days of horses where the junior guy had to get the manure off the wheels. And when you think about how many years people have been doing the same old, it gets us out of that rut that we get in and helps us be a part of that organization that everybody in the area respects. And it establishes outcomes. It's not just a feel-good type of thing. You've got an outcome, you've got something that's coming up, something that you can actually produce and show. A logical basis for decision making, like I said, it keeps people on track. We don't really have to worry about people going off on tangents. Somebody will start talking about a program or something that doesn't relate to the strategic plan. Maybe it's good in as administration. Yeah, go for it. That's not a problem. But if it's something that's going to be distracting to the organization, you can refer to the plan and go, well, you know what, it doesn't really fit the plan at this time, but, maybe later. Decisions are made throughout the entire organization. As a line firefighter, you see the world one way. As a company officer, you see the world a different way. As the fire chief, you see the world in a different way. The more you can put everybody on, improving the communication, put everybody on the same page, it just logically you're going to have a more effective outcome. And it can solve the major problems you've got in your department. I mean, everybody's got problems, maybe some are more major than others, but the communication and having something that people can refer to is a positive step in that direction. And as I've said a couple times, we're really dealing with a lot of change. When I look at the change, the 32 years I was in the fire service, there were more changes probably in the last 5 years than there were in the first 25 years, and it's only going to increase. So it helps us stay on track with that. Builds a teamwork, increases everybody's knowledge base. One of the things that I found out when I got to be chief is nobody really understands how the budgeting process works. People don't understand how the process works to, potentially buy an engine or something like that. By bringing everybody together and having this dialogue, people have a better idea and an understanding of how their operation or their organization operates. And we do it every day at home. Why wouldn't we want to do it at work? At home, there's only a few of us at home, typically us, a spouse, a few kids, maybe somebody else is temporarily staying with us, but we don't have, multiple different shifts. We don't have to consult with the bank today and say, hey, in 10 years, I want to buy a fire engine or we need to add a station. Basically what this is doing is formulating what you do now and just puts it in an official document. The fear factor, as I described, I think when you start talking to fire chiefs and saying, hey, we're going to do this, we all understand at the end of the day, if something bad happens, I'm the person that's going to be held out there. And it creates a lot of fear. I also know that in my city administration, there was some concern. Are we going to have citizens coming in going, we need 7 fire stations, and now the city administrator's got to figure out how are we going to get 7 fire stations when we only have 1. But it really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. The first one clearly is the fear of the unknown. We've all heard the 2 things that firefighters don't like. They don't like it because it's always been this way, and they don't like change. Well, we're all that way. There's a lot of things that we do in our daily lives and our professional lives that we do not necessarily because it's the best way, but to change it, there's a fear in doing that. But most of the time when we do change, we find out it's not as bad as we thought. And as I say, loss of control. There's been a couple things that I've always felt as the fire chief. If I'm the person that's ultimately responsible, then I should really have 51% of the vote. The reality, if I have 51% of the vote, I just created a stagnant organization. And I still have control. At the end of the day, you still have the ability to say, no, this is the direction we're going to go. But it's a big concern. The time frame. Is it going to be we need to build 7 fire stations in 3 years and it's just totally unrealistic? What are the variables? I call them wild cards. Every project that we've ever started and everybody else has gone through, there's always been that wild card that's come out of the blue that you never would have imagined. What are the bad things that are potentially going to come from this? Do I have the operational capacity? That was one of the things that I never gave thought of until I was a chief. Do I have enough people that I can go out and do this type of fire prevention education? I can maintain the calls that we have. We can do fire inspections as well as training in these other things. The sad reality in life is we can't do everything. The real reality is we've got to start deciding what it is that we want to do and what we can do. Implementation of technology. I had a guy on my department was a whiz with computers. Whatever you wanted to do, bam, he could do it. I had another guy that was pencil and paper because a pen was too high tech. We've all got those. And I think also when you start looking at people, especially our more senior people, and especially probably when we start getting into officers, this technology stuff we don't understand. A lot of us, when we get the new phone, we hand it to our kid and say, show me how to use this thing. There's no instruction manual, anything like that. And we're having junior people teaching senior people. And that puts fear in people, because they're not the head guy anymore. They're not the one in charge. And reassignment of duties. We don't really think about it, but one of the things is a lot of what we do, especially in the fire service, is our identity. I can pretty much guarantee that where you live, the people in your neighborhood know where the firefighters live. You don't necessarily know where the lawyer lives. You don't know where the banker lives. A lot of us, my family, in-laws, all those people, they never call me Jeff. They always call me Chief. It's a sense of identity. And when you start looking at somebody saying, well, you know what, you're the captain of EMS or chief of EMS and you know what, we're going to reassign something, you're taking away their identity, and that really creates fear. The fatal flaws, skipping a rigorous analysis, you got to know where you're at. At the end of the day, you can't fix something that you don't want to admit to. And you really have to look at that and say, you know, we're good at this and we're not so good at that. Every organization can improve. Believing it can be built in a day, you know, that's one of the things that I think really surprised me is how long it takes to get things implemented. Size of your organization is going to dictate that. You know, if you've got a small department like Perrysburg, many things you can get done in a month or two. You know, if you've got 6, 10 stations, 20 stations, you're looking upwards to a year. You got to make sure that you link your strategy to the plan and the execution. And that's one of the things, again, I found that once this plan got out there, everybody really got tied to it. And the more that they got tied to it, the more everybody in the organization, not just me, but everybody in the organization, really referred to that plan. And you got to attend the meetings. You're going to get what you get out of it. You know, typically, you know, what we did, 8 meetings, and that's typically what most people do. If you only go to 4 meetings and you only do a little bit, you're not going to get the full effect out of it. You got to assemble the team. Clearly, you want to have people from your department in it. And if you've got an organization, you've got a union, you've got some other special interest group, make sure that you have their representation. The honest thing is, at the end of the day, if somebody thinks their identity is getting taken away or they're getting reassigned and this isn't going to be good, you're going to have grievance, you're going to have all these other things. By getting people in throughout the entire process, it really eliminates that. And I'll tell you, when I look at all the fear, that was one of the big fears that I had, and it didn't happen. All the fears that I had as far as loss of control and all that, none of those things happened. Community elected people, they're going to give you the money to do it. At the end of the day, if they're there and they see the process, we invited all our elected people. Didn't get huge turnout from them. I think the most anybody was there was like maybe 3 out of the 8 meetings. But they understood the process, and because they understood the process, they were comfortable with the process. So when we went to talk to them about we want to do A, B, or C, they were focused on that. They weren't focused on the process. How did you get here? Other city departments and people that you have in the city, that one I think is a double-edged sword. I think this is where you have to refer to your community that you have. And let's say you're going to do something with the police department on active shooter. That's a big thing nowadays. Well, you know, the police already have vests, so they're probably going to be in a cost to the fire department. Is the police department going to view this as you're taking money out of their pocket? So kind of read that one and see, you know, based on your organization, what you think is going to be best. But I'm going to give you an alternative here. Other governmental agencies, you know, last night I went and helped the city of Rossford. They're doing one. I was kind of in the audience while they were doing it. So they're getting some information from some people outside. You've got school people. The superintendent was there. Who knows more about levies than school superintendents? If you think you're going to get a levy, and you're going to have to be raising money, they can tell you everything about levies in your community. What's going to work, what's not going to work. They're good allies to sit here and say, hey, the sheriff, you've got a law enforcement component. You know, maybe he's not the person that protects your area, but you know, when you start talking about initiatives that cross over into police, you know, they can kind of give you that. In other county officials, in one of those that I look at on that is, you know, let's talk finance. Not many finance people want to give up their money. For some reason, it's we got the money, we got to keep it. What if something happens tomorrow? We're going to have a rainy day. They may not necessarily be very forthcoming at your meeting. They may balk at some things because it's like, oh, I think it's going to cost too much money. But if you bring somebody from the county auditor's office in to sit down and speak, they're not going to be able to sit and say, this is how necessarily your city does it, A, B, C, but they can talk about the fundamentals of governmental budgeting. So that's kind of one of those things. Go out there and you really got to know your area, weigh it out, what works, what doesn't work, you know, and who the key people are going to be. Business owners. Business owners, at least my experience in Perrysburg, we had a core group of them were very involved in city things because of the type of business they had. You know, they own a restaurant, they don't want food trucks. They get a lot of attention from the city leaders and the people that are elected. Along with that, I would say private sector experts. Last night in Rossford, they had an architect there who was able to talk about some strategic planning and, you know, structures for the buildings and that, for the fire station. No, he can't necessarily speak to the process in purchasing in the city, but he can lend his expertise to that. There was a nurse there last night. You know, maybe you're doing something with medications or something like that. The hospital does a little different. You know, they may be a very valuable resource to tap into that you're not really thinking about. The movers and the shakers, every community's got them. The key thing is you've got elected people, and they have people that hang around them that get whatever they want. You know, they feed the egos, do whatever. They seem to get what they want. Align yourself with them. You know who they are. You've seen them. You've heard their name. If you can get those people on board, that person's going to your elected people saying, hey, look, you know, I sat in on this. This is a great deal. This is something we got to do. That's free advertisement for you. You really need to jump on that. And the gatekeepers, we'll get a little bit more into that a little bit, but basically they track the initiative and stay with it and make sure things keep going like they're supposed to go. Got to establish the parameters. When do you want to meet? The unfortunate truth is when you're bringing all these people together, you're probably going to be doing evening meetings. Unless you're in a metropolitan area where everybody works during the day, people are going to be taking time off work. So plan probably on the evenings, but try and figure out when a good one's going to be for you. How often do you want to meet? What most people do is every couple weeks. Seems to work good. Only for an hour or two. You don't really want to sit too long because then what happens, you really do start rehashing and beating the dead horse into the ground. You don't really want to do that. And the other factor is, like I said, you're probably dealing with evening meetings, and most of us aren't always overjoyed with evening meetings, and you want to make wise use of the people's time. You know, they're coming here, they're trying to help you out. I was very impressed at Chief Ruiz. We started at 6 o'clock, and it ended at 7. At 6:50, hey, let's do a recap. Boom, boom, boom. Thanks, everybody. Now, people would stay and talk. Not a problem. But if people had to get out, you were respectful of their time, and I think it's very important. Where do you want to have it? Fire stations are great places because, you know, when you start bringing people in, you can kind of give them the day-to-day tour of what works and what doesn't work, a little bit more than, you know, just your typical station tour for Boy Scouts or something like that. The flip side is a lot of departments don't really have the space, you know, so maybe you want to do one meeting at a department and then move to a library or council chambers. You've got multiple stations. Maybe you want to go from, you know, one station to different stations to kind of show people the difference. But that's going to be up to you, your call. Need to create a vision statement. And this is really going to be done most likely from the administration, your more senior staff, which is basically, as it says, it's a roadmap from where you are to where do you want to go. It needs to be short. You know, you don't want to write a paragraph that nobody's going to be able to read or remember. You know, it's got to be based on your operations, no open words. It's got to be simple. You know, you start putting whereas and pursuant to and all that sort of stuff, people aren't going to understand it. And you want people to be able to look at it and go, oh, okay, I see where you're at. And it's got to be flexible. As I said, it's, you know, we see a lot of different things, the way the world's changing. And if the more rigid you make it, the harder it's going to be flexible. And it needs to align with the values that we're going to talk here about in a minute. This is the one that Perrysburg had. Sorry about the little cursor right there. I got to drop something so I can read it. Our vision is to provide world-class fire protection and emergency care to the citizens and visitors of Perrysburg. We will accomplish this by collaborating with internal and external stakeholders, develop members for the future, and foster an atmosphere of trust, innovation, creativity, and accountability. A little bit longer than what my goal really would have been, but the truth is I think it says it all, and it's not overly complicated, and it seems to have a good flow to it. Now, we talk a little bit about values. You need to identify your organizational values. You know, that's one of the things a lot of people don't really think about. But your organization values certain things. What are they? You know, because really, at the end of the day, don't you want everybody's actions to be based on doing what's right, not what the rule is? You know, when I always would talk to people about rules and policies and SOGs, you know, they're written based on an event, typically, or potential event, or what have you. But you really have to understand what the intent to that is. What's the intent to that rule? You know, and I think that's one of those things that, especially in today's society, we can't create a rule for everything. So if we can get people understanding what the values of the organization, the philosophies of the organization, we can move from follow the letter of the rule to do the smart thing that makes sense for the time. And by doing that and having these values, you're not going to have people tripping over themselves and getting in trouble. What we did, what Chief Ruiz did, I'll give him credit, he's the guy that did it, is he gave out 50 different values that are common values that people had. People picked 5, and then we ended up picking the top 4. And when you look at what you have here, there are some that you can just look at, and they scream fire department: family, honor, you know, loyalty, reputation, teamwork. You know, those are the ones that you're pretty much going to expect to find, and that is exactly what we found. With slight variances, just about everybody came up with the same thing. I was kind of interested, though, last night Rossford added a new one. They added the word balance. And at first I was kind of a little strange, and then they explained the balance is between the resources we have, the expectations of the community, and you know, and the budgets and so forth. So we need to maintain a good balance. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was a good use of these. So when you're looking at this kind of thing, kind of think of neat little things like that you can come up with. These are the ones that we came up with. Perrysburg: family, honesty, integrity, and teamwork. Again, nothing to fear here. There really wasn't anything that was off the charts. Managed to get a challenge coin made, put them on the challenge coin. That was one of those things we gave everybody that came to the meetings. We gave them one. They're very well received. The mission statement, probably a good time to look at that and review that. Do you have one? Is it short and concise? Ours was made probably around like 95, 97, something like that. And I've got it here in a second. Very wordy. I don't want to say very wordy, but it just kind of bland, vanilla. You know, not really a lot to it. And nobody really ever, for lack of better terms, nobody ever really drank the Kool-Aid. And doesn't really align with you know, the values and the mandates that you have in your organization. And basically, what Chief Ruiz did is he sent it out to the group and said, hey, submit how many you want. And we had probably about 20 of them, if I remember correctly. And this was one that I was very concerned about, because I thought, oh boy, somebody's going to put something in there. And it was kind of funny because there was one, and it wasn't bad. It was just not really what you'd want for a mission statement. And it was funny, but nobody voted for it. So when you're doing this, your department will start taking ownership in this, and they'll look and go, no, I want something that's going to make me proud. You know, I'm not one of those things that's just a cute little internal fire thing. So this is one of those things, like I say, I was very nervous about, but it came out well for us. Our first mission statement was the typical one from the 90s: improve the quality of life within the city of Perrysburg by providing protection of life, property threatened by fire, medical, and all other natural and man-made disasters. Because at the time, if you didn't put natural in there, evidently the fire department didn't respond to tornadoes, or man-made, we didn't respond to terrorists or fires or things like that. And that was really the philosophy of the day. I mean, that's really what everybody's was like. The new one, Perrysburg Fire Division, is dedicated to providing the highest quality EMS, fire protection, and education to the citizens that we serve. And we took the values and we took the mission statement. Just about everybody put it on their email signature. And we had it hanging around different places. And it was one of those that the old one, nobody could tell you. But you know, about a week after the strategic plan was out, everybody in the organization could tell you what the new mission statement was. So it was a big success in that. You know, got to look at what your mandates are. We've all got mandates, and sometimes it's very hard to separate the mandates from feel-goods. You know, we all want to go out and do PR and do some of these things, but again, do we have the organizational capacity to do it? And we've got to start figuring out, and it's going to be unique to you, unique to your organization, what direction is it going to be? You know, fire suppression, pretty much everybody, we're going to be doing fire suppression. Fire prevention, what's the level of fire prevention that meets the needs of your community? EMS, are you a first responder? Do you transport? Do you ALS? Do you BLS? It's all over the board. You know, technical rescue, this is one of those that you look at. You know, a lot of places, they want to do technical rescue, but they really don't have the organizational capacity. You know, CPR, you know, I'm a big proponent of that. We had a great CPR program in the city of Perrysburg, along with car seat installation. But the car seat installation was, and CPR at times was very taxing to the organization to try and get some of these other things accomplished. So you really have to look and say, what is my organization ready to handle? What can we do? You know, and your legislation that you have locally, your state, your federal mandates, the NFPA, Board of Building Standards, you know, all the different national standards, you know, how do they come in as a standard and apply to our organization? No, they're not law. We all know we're going to, if something happens, we're going to be based on that. And how can we meet the intent of those within our organization? And the informal mandates, you know, what are the community expectations? Not long after I got to be chief, it was kind of funny. I would be asked by the city administration, and they would say, well, why do you do this? I said, well, it's what the community expects. Well, who told you that? I don't know. The previous chiefs. It's what we've always done. This actually, when you start dealing with the public, it gives credence to what you're doing. You know, it's in our strategic plan. You know what? We had people from the public here. They came in and they sat down, and this is what they're expecting out of us. The mistakes that typically people make during the mandates, mandates, when people think of mandates, they think of have-tos. You know, if we're going to talk car safety, you know, let's say bike safety, you know, you got to wear a helmet. You know, you got to wear a helmet. That's the mandate. It doesn't mean you can't go above and beyond. It doesn't mean that you can't put knee pads, elbows pads on, things like that. Don't become self-limiting that, okay, this is a mandate. We've got to follow it in this direction, but we can't go above and beyond. And that goes to believing that they're more restrained and sticking to the letter of the law. I mean, I think that's one of those things that a lot of people fall into that trap. And again, in my personal opinion, it's the belief of, or not the belief, it's the intent of what is the rule, what are we trying to do here? At the end of the day, you have to start somewhere. You've got to start prioritizing what can your organization do, what do they need to do? You know, what's most important? You know, Perrysburg bedroom community, we have hazmat issues, but we don't have high things. You know, what is our budget? You know, what is our organizational capacity? Like I said with the car seats and the CPR, they're great programs, but they really at times taxed our ability to provide that service. And once you start providing it and you make promises to people, I'm a firm believer, it's once you've made that promise, you got to live up to your promises. Is it really something that you can accomplish? Maybe the most important thing that you have is cost prohibitive. It's going to require hiring 20 people at $100,000 each, and it's going to jack your budget by $2 million, and the city's in fiscal crunch, and it's not going to happen. Or you want to do the program, like I said, with car seat, something like that, but you just don't have the people. And while it says ease of accomplishment, I would say realistic to accomplish. Is it something that's realistic? Because I think if you start putting something out before people that they're not going to be able to accomplish, it becomes demoralizing, and it just puts you back in the tailspin of where you probably were. Now, the meetings that we held, like I said, everybody's time is valuable. Make sure you start on time, get them out of there on time. Keep everybody on task. Anytime you have a group and people start talking about ideas, yep, you're going to start talking about building a fire station. Next thing you know, you're going to be talking about, bike safety or something like that. Make sure everybody stays on task and moving forward and doing what they're supposed to be doing. Keep everybody involved in all aspects of the plan. One of the things Chief Ruiz did, we had sign-in sheets at every table, and the first couple meetings you'd kind of discuss, what are, how are we going to do this, and what are the different, for lack of a better term, identifying what some of the issues in the organization may be. And then the next ones are, how do we create strategies for those? If you're going to do one for facilities, one for training, and one for recruitment and retention, don't have the same people sitting at the same table every meeting. You're not getting everybody's input. You're only getting one or two people's or a few people's input. And there may be other people that would have some better ideas and build on what that person has already said, or that person may have some great ideas somewhere else. So that was an integral key, like I say, that Chief Ruiz did, was making sure that nobody sat at the same table twice, with the exception of the gatekeepers. We'll talk about them a little bit. And again, always refer to the vision, the values, and the mission statement, because you will find things that people will start, kind of going off on, special projects that they want. They want to have a high-angle rescue team or whatever. By having the vision, the values, and the mission statement reflect what your end goal really is, that helps keep people on track and keeps the wandering down. SWOT analysis, I think most people are probably familiar with this, your strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats. Some people call them challenges rather than threats. Whatever terminology works for your community, great, go ahead and use it. But at the end of the day, you really need to take a close look at this and be honest. Nobody is perfect. And, you're trying to make your organization better. You can't make your organization better if you try and sugarcoat things or protect things. One of the things I was very concerned about was the fact that we are going to have, people coming in, and like I say, we got to hire 20 people. We had, at the time, 27 full-time people. And we're not going to just hire 20 more people. We have one station. We're not going to just add 3 or 4 more. But you can pretty much guess out of all these, probably everybody's going to fall into these. At some level, the ever-popular staffing is going to come up. Recruitment and retention. We got really great people. The best people in Perrysburg. They're around second to none. But in the volunteer and the part-time side, what do we got to do to keep these people here? What do we got to do to train them and keep them motivated to do things? Station, I don't know too many places that sit here and go, my station's perfect. We don't need additional stations. We don't need any upgrades. Life is wonderful. When you look at the Perrysburg just broke ground the other day on a new station. One of the big things on that's cancer prevention. That wasn't around 5 years ago. The equipment, new engines, new ladders, medics, cot lift systems, things like that. Training. Everybody that I've ever talked to, no matter how good the training program is, there's always room for some improvement there. Public relations, and not just public relations. What do you consider public relations to be? and what's responsible and cost effective for your community is going to vary. One of the things that I was talked into doing was buying plastic fire helmets. We had never done anything like that, and went out and bought plastic fire helmets. We were buying them all the time, and I'm like, I don't know what these guys are doing with it, but man, we seem to be going through these things. And a couple months after I retired, I was shopping at Kroger's, and all of a sudden these kids were coming through the store, and they're wearing fire helmets, and I'm thinking, what's going on? And then I ran into the one crew, and they had a stack of these fire helmets, and they were giving them out to these kids. The kids loved it. The parents loved it. People in the store loved it. It was a great thing, and it really was really neat to see. But what is it that your public really wants? That may not really work somewhere else. And then technology. The way technology is changing today, especially with FirstNet coming and some of these other things, it's going to be a big deal for everybody. But this is really what everything's going to fall under. And again, I was really worried that people were going to sit here and say we need 20 people. Nobody did that. And some of the people that I would have expected in my organization to push that, they were actually the ones saying, well, yeah, but that's going to cost too much money. That's just not realistic to do. And even if we hired 20 people, we couldn't train them properly. So you shouldn't worry about any of these things. And this is what we came up in Perrysburg. Now, these were the strengths that they had. Like I say, well-trained people. They jump trucks, so they're multidisciplinary. They can do whatever needs to be done. And you can see the whole list of things. Weaknesses. We did move different shifts. We did have a lot of problem with equipment. I don't know any fire department that's happy with their equipment. Our stuff was going in all the time, and it wasn't misuse from the people. It was just gumming up motors and things like that, and problems getting it fixed. Opportunities, like I said, he just broke ground on a second fire station. That's been something that's been on the books for a good 30 years. Additional fire prevention, pre-plans, getting people out in the businesses. We always talked about restructuring the organization because, very honestly, that was one thing that I never was really able to get to the level that I wanted, but it's almost the same format as it was when I started. It was just very difficult to kind of get away from that. And then your threats or challenges. Every now and then we see firefighters getting in trouble. And what happens if one of our people does that? What are we going to do? How are we going to respond? What's the public going to think? What is the public? What we do every day versus what the public thinks. Our housing is was getting larger. City was expanding. Are the roads able to handle it? Managerial decisions. At first I kind of looked at that and thought, oh, I think they mean me. But the real reality is whoever's there today is not going to be there forever. There's going to be changes throughout your organization. Unexpectedly, this new opportunity came for me, and I took advantage of it, which made several other changes in Perrysburg. And at any point in time, you've got to be ready for that because, you get one bad lieutenant or one bad captain or, bad chief, whatever. It can be a huge threat to the organization. And you need to keep the team focused on finding a solution. And what I mean by this is people come in a lot of times with preconceived ideas. The problem with our response time is we need another fire station. Maybe, you need a better dispatch system and get the people out the door quicker. Maybe that's where the problem is. And you need to focus more on, from the time of call to the time on scene, it takes too long to get there. Don't start out going down the road of, we need a second station. And that's where I think you need to write things somewhat loose. But that was one thing that I think a lot of people really do have a problem with, because it's so easy to sit here and say, I read about this, and we need this computer program, or we need to do that. Just keep that in the back of your mind. And I think if you've ever been through OFE or EFO, that was always one of the biggest problems people had in the research projects. One of the ones that I started with was we don't have MDTs, and how are we going to do it? Because that's a problem. Well, why is it a problem? You know, first we had to identify that. So always keep that in the back of your mind. Putting it all together, again, you got to review your priorities. Are they still appropriate, and are they realistic? You don't want to put something in that's not achievable. And if you're not going to get it, you're not going to reach it, don't put it in. Realistic timeline, that's the same thing. Don't try and do something in 3 years or 5 years. It's going to take 8 or 9 years. It's better to keep that in, because there's no crime in not getting an initiative accomplished, as long as you're working towards it. You know, there may be things that come up and prevent you from doing it, but just make sure it's realistic, because once it starts to fall apart, you're going to start losing people. Things that you're going to need, like we talked about, the location, tables, things for people to sit. If you want to use flip charts, that's great. Sign-in sheets. Always a good idea to have a sign-in sheet, because you're going to want to know who's there, and you're going to want to put that actually in your final report. Food, and like I say, people like little knickknacks to walk away with, especially things that are like fire department related, pens and that sort of stuff. So try and have a little something for them. What we did is Chief Ruiz set up 8 meeting dates. The first one was basically, hey, this is what we want from you. We want you to come every couple weeks. We're going to be respectful of your time. We're going to get you in, we're going to get you out, and this is how the process is going to work. And then we spent 2 or 3 meetings just sitting here talking about, different things about the organization. How does it operate? And what can we do better? What are we lacking in? And then you've got to have some sort of goal measurement. So then we start sitting down for the next few meetings, looking at this, saying, okay, well, how are we going to measure this? How do I know if this is a success? You want to make sure that if you're going out and you're saying we're going to put, we're going to do this for bike helmets, that bike helmet safety, you're really making a difference. And then you got to review and put it all together. We had a meeting at the end and said, here you go, this is what the final thing is. What do you think? Any questions, concerns, kind of before it goes public, and it gives those people, makes them feel a little bit special, because they got the opportunity to kind of see it before everybody else does. Now, the gatekeepers, those are typically internal people, and what we did is we kind of watched, who really kind of shined in certain things, and we had them do it. Like I say, our people, and they're the only people that stay at that table. They're the only people that stay with that initiative, because it becomes their baby, and they want to watch that baby grow up. They're responsible for everything that happens. So, they're going to provide updates a couple times a year, make sure things are staying on task. And like I said, it really was very interesting, because every initiative that we came up with, everybody took ownership in it. And it wasn't one of those things where it fell back on the chief has to do it. You had delegation at levels that were very appropriate. And then, like I say, they report back to the evaluators twice a year, and that helps kind of keep them on track. And the evaluators try and get somebody independent from the community. Some of the, people, what we used is we used people that came to our strategic planning meetings, because they had a fairly good idea of everything that was going on. And one of the reasons is when the gatekeeper reports back to them, they can sit here and say, well, this, and this happened, but, I did this, but nothing happened to it. And in my own circumstance, and I felt bad about it, one of the things we were working on was job descriptions, and they gave it to me, and I set it on my desk, and I put a piece of paper over it, and I forgot about it. Well, people that are your subordinates are probably not going to say, hey, why are you doing this? The gatekeeper was the one that sent me the thing and said, hey, they gave this to you, you need to do something with it. And really, it's one of those things that's great, and it keeps everybody on task, and it's that outside entity, if you will, that's kind of watching over you. And these are just some pictures, a couple pictures we got coming up. This is inside the Perrysburg Fire Station. The only one we have, you can see it's a little bit tight. That's Chief Ruiz right there, kind of giving an overview how we had it set up. We've got members from our organization and the public. We've got a deputy prosecutor right there, a retired police officer from a neighboring community. Very beneficial. Both of them kind of understand the job that we're doing. More members from the community right there, business people, people that had ideas on things that they wanted to see. You know, one of the things I was afraid of was we had some tensions, if you will, a little bit before, and you know, that people are going to come in and, oh, you got to do this, this, and this. And really, I found by having the community people come in, it was more of an education thing for them, and nobody was really off the charts on anything that they wanted. And the people that did have questions on it got their questions answered, and quite frankly, only came for the first couple of days. And here's a report back where, at the end of the day, at the end of the meeting, reporting back on what that table discussed. So to create your plan, you've got to have an executive summary, you know, just kind of an overview, just what it is, introduction. You always have to kind of have some sort of organizational overview. Because when people read these things, you know, especially other fire departments and that, you know, they kind of want to know, you know, they compare oranges to oranges or what have you. How the process worked, what your core programs are, you know, what formats are you using, who your stakeholders are. Again, you know, a lot of these stakeholders and the gatekeepers and that, they're going to be your allies when it comes to the end of this. The analysis, what your strengths, weaknesses, your initiatives, what you're going to use to measure. How do you identify, is it a success? Like I say, you want to be able to show people. And I think that's one of the things the fire service has been bad about for years. You know, when I started, it was like, well, we're an insurance policy. We put fires out. That's what we do. Now, our communities want to know, if we're giving you $5,000 to do this, how do I know it's better spent with you versus with your service divisions or something? So the more that you can put in there to say, hey, this is what we did, and this is why it was a success, just validates your whole plan. And this is just kind of how we had it set up. Our first initiative, professional development, getting people where they need to be, getting people the right kind of training. You know, at one point we kind of had a training where it was like, oh, well, just put in for the training and we'll send you. And now what we're trying to do is organize a little bit better. You know, the guy that's been here for 1 year may not need company officer, but somebody's getting ready for promotion really should. And Chief Whitmore and Captain Grossman were the gatekeepers on this one. And then you want to have an appendix, your national standards, your surveys, anything that you've got supporting. You know, if you're going to talk about response times and our response times are bad, have something in there. You know, we use some stuff from our GIS department, was phenomenal. You know, what your training records are. You know what, we need to replace the engine because it's always in the shop and getting fixed. Well, how do I know that? Well, here's the maintenance records. Here's the cost. This is what we're actually spending. Any others, like I say, any supporting documents. If you're looking for accreditation or you are accredited organization, this helps keep you on task. This is one of those things that the accrediting agencies look at, and so it is a major benefit. This is the book that's kind of the Bible on this. There's actually, this is the second edition. Third edition is actually out now. That's the one Chief Ruiz actually used. It's a very good book. It explains a lot, and I'm kind of giving you an overview today of how the process works. It goes a lot more in depth if you're looking to do something like that. I appreciate everybody's time today. Hopefully everybody got something out of it. You've got my contact information there. Not a problem. Feel free to give me a call, track me down. I'd be happy to talk with any about this. Again, it was a great process. Chief Ruiz did a phenomenal job with it. It's nothing that anybody should fear. You know, if it's something you're not sure if you can do, Ohio Fire Chiefs does have a consulting branch that can provide whatever level of help, you know, in that you can use on it. A little bit to get you started and send you on your way, or if you need the whole thing. But I do appreciate everybody's time today. I wish everyone well, and thank you very much. You all have a good day.